We're in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and we're here to explore some of the business and investment opportunities in what is considered the biggest economy here in East Africa. Well, to give us some insight and tell us a little bit more is our next guest, and that is Jibran Qureishi. He is Standard Bank's East Africa economist.
I think Kenya and East Africa in general has been a bright shining light in an otherwise very depressing sub-Saharan Africa in 2015 and also 2016. Kenya has stood out because of its broad-based sources of economic growth. It's a very diversified economy. And of course it's benefited from the decline in commodity prices, being a net oil importer, and also inflation baskets have improved. But of course, as we go on over the next couple of years, possibly even the medium term, a lot of infrastructure spend needs to be intensified, and of course structural reforms have to pick up.
What kind of growth figures are we talking about?
So we're expecting economic growth to expand by 5.7% in 2015. We've revised our 2016 outlook to 5.6% from 6% previously. We've done this primarily because of the interest rate cap that was administered in September earlier this year.
In this diversified outlook that you talk about in terms of income and revenue for the Kenyan economy, which are the big stars?
Right, so Kenya still remains an agrarian economy. Over a third of GDP is still contributed by agriculture. But over the last 5 to 7 years, there has been new drivers of growth, predominantly from the construction sector. We believe this is largely underpinned by the ongoing public investment in infrastructure. But of course, technology and innovation has also played a huge part in helping GDP growth get to closer to the 6% levels that I think most policymakers envisage for the next 2 to 3 years.
Let's take a look at the tourism sector. What impact has terrorism had on that sector?
The thing about tourism in East Africa is if Kenya isn't performing well, neighboring Tanzania has got the wildlife game park, Serengeti. They've got the beaches in Zanzibar. So if security is not too optimal in Kenya, then there's always tourism traffic that's diverted in Tanzania. But of course, 2016 has been a good year in the sense that there hasn't been terror attacks like what we saw, in 2014 and 2015. And on the back of this, we've seen a big recovery in conference tourism. Kenya has hosted some high-profile conferences such as UNCTAD, WTO, and recently the TICA Japanese conference as well. And along with this, it's coincided with high-profile visits from state officials such as President Barack Obama. So I think this year there's been a general sense of optimism around tourism. But of course, so long as Kenya's army or forces are deployed in neighboring Somalia to ostensibly pursue extremist groups such as Al-Shabaab, there's always a risk of tourism not becoming a significant driver of growth. And of course, as we get up into elections next year, Kenya is heading towards elections in August 2017, the anxiety associated with elections could arguably also lead to a slowdown in tourism inflows.
You mentioned oil as well, the discovery of oil in 2012. What is the latest as far as that is concerned, as how soon we expect that to come online?
So at this point in time, I think in our view, the first export, at least on a commercial level, would probably be in the early 2020s. The Kenyan government will export a small amount of oil in the second quarter next year. But from what we understand, it's largely just to test the waters out there, to see how waxy the oil content is, to try and understand where the market for that oil is. So we don't expect this to lead to a significant rise in export earnings over the coming year, but I think the feasibility study is being put in place. But the more pertinent question for us is, what is Kenya doing between now and the date of the first oil export to diversify its economy further? And of course, I think 2016 has served as a lesson, given the case studies we've seen in parts of West Africa around how important it is not to be singularly reliant on a singular export earner.
Finally, we've spoken about the opportunities. One of the biggest challenges, I suppose not just here in Kenya, but it seems to be a bigger problem here, is the perception of corruption, which seems to be pervasive. What kind of advice do you have for people who want to come and invest in this economy?
So So I mean that's a good point. So obviously the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business recently highlighted that Kenya has been the top performer in the very recent report. Corruption is a problem. There's nobody who's going to turn a blind eye to it. And of course, in the long term, it could serve as an impediment for anyone looking to invest in Kenya. And for the investment climate to actually improve, we need to do away with graft. But the thing we need to remember is that under Kenya's new constitution, the government system was devolved into 47 counties. And I think there's a lot of fiscal dominance that's come through as a result of that. And monitoring, transparency and accountability hasn't been ideal, but was never going to be easy. Devolution has never been an easy path, and I don't think it's going to be so in Kenya's case. But we're quite encouraged that there has been some positive developments, at least from policymakers and government, to actually try and tackle most of these corruption scandals that have become quite rampant over the couple of months.
How big a presence is there here of South African investment, and how much of an appetite is there?
I think South African investment is probably more, evident in Tanzania. Obviously, they have stronger trade links with Tanzania than Kenya. But over the coming, years, we do expect this relationship to get bolstered. Kenya remains the hub of East Africa, at least a financial hub for now. It is, the largest economy by GDP in the East African region. It surrounds landlocked regions. And of course, if you do bolster your infrastructure capability, your ability to service your landlocked partners for sustainable development growth will actually improve. So I think over time we expect investors from South Africa to actually continue to flock in.